You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network. This is Talking Headways, a weekly podcast about sustainable transportation and urban design. I'm Jeff Wood. This week we're joined by Mark Kabbash, founder of the Dandy Horse. He chats with us about a new system for measuring and verifying bike commuting to obtain carbon avoidance credits. We chat about how the system works and the funding it could generate. Stay with us. Today's podcast is brought to you by our super wonderful, terrific, amazing Patreon supporters. We appreciate you all keeping this show and Mondays at the Overhead Wire going. To join this merry band of city wizards and transportation experts, go to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. $2 a month gets you some stickers and a handwritten note sent with a cool train station stamp. $10 a month gets you one of our transportation scarves. We've also got some bonus material up there, so check it out if you haven't already. And speaking of scarves, the heavyweight net bike scarf is back in stock. I'm also going to make a concerted effort to make some new designs, but if you want to get one of the Buster Bike scarves or the Lightweight Bike scarf now, visit theoverheadwire.com or support us on Patreon. And if you'd like to support the show in other ways, you can buy books at the bookshop site, bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire, or find our Cars Are Cholesterol merch at bit.ly/carsarcholesterol. For anything else, including the Town Planning and Practice audiobook, visit theoverheadwire.com and definitely sign up for the almost 20-year-old daily newsletter. Or you can just keep listening and enjoying the show. We appreciate that too. You can also find us on Blue Sky, Mastodon, Threads, Instagram, Flickr, YouTube, Substack, and LinkedIn if you want to connect, usually at the Overhead Wire, but with Flickr, it's Transit Nerds. Some great stuff coming up, so keep on listening and enjoy the show. A quick note for Patreon supporters. I've set up an ad-free podcast RSS feed at Patreon. This means if you want to listen to the show without ads or promotional episodes in your podcatcher of choice, you can do so by heading over to your Patreon account and getting the feed there. I'll post instructions in the show notes of how to do it. And if you aren't a Patreon supporter, you can do so by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. Even just $1 a month gets you our podcast free of outside ads. That's patreon.com/theoverheadwire. Well, Mark Kabbash, welcome to the Talking Headways podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, my. Well, I'll tell you the worst parts first. I actually lied on my first job application. I'm kind of fond of saying that. I was supposed to be 17 years old for my first job, which was a bicycle messenger. And I liked it so much, I kind of fibbed a little, and I was 15 when I did so. So it's been part of my ethos for quite a long time.
The bicycle part, not the lying part.
Correct. Thank you. Yes.
So how did you get interested in cycling early on?
Well, I don't think I've really had a bad day bicycling. I bicycled across the country at a very early age, 16 years old. I think I rode my bike from Boston by myself up through New Hampshire, Maine, back to New Hampshire, Vermont, and back to Boston without GPS or a phone, which back then was a tough thing. I really enjoy being on the world's most efficient mode of transportation. It's really a wonderful way of life. I call my steeds, and my company's called the Dandy Horse, but I have in New York City apartment, I have way too many bicycles in my living room, much to the chagrin of my wife.
I can understand that.
Yes, so I'm fond of saying that if a bicycle of mine were stolen, I'm not going to call the police and report grand larceny. I'm going to call the FBI and report kidnapping.
You love them that much.
Absolutely.
That's good. And so what about your work background? What do you generally do with your time and what's your history?
Well, I've been self-employed since 19 years old. I'm fond of saying that my best friend, the best man I've ever known in my life, the best man at my wedding, my father, was a director of research at 7 different Wall Street firms and partner of 3 different brokerage firms. When I got in trouble at boarding school, my friends went to camp. I went to go stuff envelopes and lick stamps, and my friends knew batting averages, and I grew up knowing PE ratios. So I have a history of Wall Street and investor relations and funding different projects and companies, and I had the privilege of following those that excited me and gained my interest the most. And that's been my mode of learning, which has been fueled by interest. And I think that's really a wonderful way of life.
I agree. That's kind of how I am too. It's like the things that are interesting, the things that you want to learn about, and that lifetime learning is a really good way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to know a little bit about your company, the Dandy Horse, and its origins, and even the origin of the name.
Well, the name, I wish I could say it was a unique name on Tyrone, but it was one of the original names back 200 years ago applied to the bicycle. It is the bike that you see little children on without pedals and a chain, and it's how they learn how to ride today. So the dandy horse is an homage to the original name. The reason why I created the dandy horse, it's pretty simple. That person I referenced earlier, my father, battled Parkinson's for 18 years, and the last 5 weren't that fun. Any minute with my dad was fantastic. But what I tried to do is raise money in different charity events pertaining to the cause that was impacting his health. And you're very limited with using the bicycle as a means to raise money. You've all probably been on bicycle charity events. You know how they take place, but they're very inefficient in a way that they allocate or they collect money and the fees associated to it. I'll give you an example. In New York City, there is a ride that starts at the Intrepid, the aircraft carrier, and it goes up the West Side Highway across the George Washington Bridge. They actually rented the George Washington Bridge, rode up to Hunter Mountain and back. And the cost associated to it was extravagant. But people from, let's say, Bangor, Maine, would come down to New York City, solicit friends and family to donate money on a per-mile basis, and they would come to New York and do that ride, but it would be so out of whack with regards to the amount of money they raised, but also the cost associated to that individual. So I came to the mindset that there's got to be a better way to take the goodwill of the individual cyclist and make every ride a charity ride. Our team filed a patent that gave us the ability to give the brand recognition of the sponsor. In this case, let's take a bicycle jersey, and let's take a company, let's call it SRAM Bicycle Manufacturer as a jersey in front, and in the back, let's say it's Michael J. Fox Foundation, which would be the cause that sponsor would be willing to compensate the rider for those miles ridden. But there's no confidence that the truth of those miles or the jersey being worn to give confidence to SRAM to continually make donations. So we did something very simple, Jeffrey. What we did is we put a QR code on the fabric within the apparel in the lower left-hand corner. We put a QR code on the helmet of the bicycle. We used NFC tags, near-field communication tags, and we put it on the bicycle. So before a ride, we asked the people to launch our application, which is called VIDAT. There's only 4 ways you could scientifically prove anything, Jeffrey, and that's you could verify it through an inspection, demonstration, analysis, and testing. We do all 4 in a method to create a high level of authentication of a bicyclist, origination point, pathway, but it kind of felt odd making money when you're trying to benefit a charity. So it didn't feel right, but the technology was there. Then all of a sudden, the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, had put forth what's called the Climate Disclosure Act. And what they said is that every company that reports on those exchanges, the New York Stock Exchange, etc., make claims that they are more environmentally friendly in regarding their carbon emissions than other companies. But if they were to make a claim that was unsubstantiated in a financial statement and it was wrong, people go to jail. And organizations were making claims pertaining to how environmentally conscious they were without the ability to verify and prove that those claims were accurate. So investors are actually pouring money into unverified or unsubstantiated claims. So with my father's background and my understanding of Wall Street, I came to the conclusion we'll use the same methodology to create a means of which organizations can make a factual statement and be able to support it with auditable data. And that's the origination of our process.
How did you kind of start to think about it as something that could be used in a broader sense?
Well, bicycle infrastructure, bicycle theft, and those are the things that really have bothered me. For instance, if you take Route 66 as an example, and you built that highway from Chicago to Barney's Beanery in LA without hotels, gas stations, or parking lots, cars wouldn't be able to travel on that highway very far. On top of that, there would be no ability to come up with a maintenance of the highway by taxing or creating commerce based off of the usage of that pathway. So what's happening in America's bicycle infrastructure is the same thing. They're pouring money out of creating money from taxation and grants to build a pathway, and then they're burdening the local municipalities with means to find ability to create an income to maintain those pathways. And it was short-sighted. I applaud their efforts, but I think they've not done as well as they could have. So what we've done is we've tethered our commuter, in this case, I refer to our process, a bicycle commuter carbon avoidance credit. It's widely understood that bicyclists, or a bicycle as a mode of transportation, still, to date, is the world's most efficient mode of transportation. Nothing comes close, even walking. So what we had to do is to create the delta. How can we prove the avoidance of carbon emissions? First, you had to create a baseline, what you normally do in mode of transportation. So our application was pretty clever. Our team came up with the understanding that if you fill out the profile in our app, you're going to also have to put in the VIN number of your vehicle. We would ping the different agencies like the Department of Transportation, Department of Motor Vehicles, and we'll find out the name, make, and model of your vehicle, which includes the emission rates. So that would be the baseline. And then we look at the traffic pattern to your destination where you work. And we look at the traffic patterns of that journey. And at times, if you're in traffic for an hour with your motor running at idle, you can emit as much as 4,000 grams of CO2 per hour at idle. Now, a cyclist, they only produce 34 grams per mile as you bicycle commute. So that carbon savings, we've come up with a methodology to have the international standards, the committees of which govern the protocols in which you could verify and collect data and then verify it. We meet the sweet spots. So we focus on the delta, the difference, and you create a carbon credit and submit it to exchanges of which then the carbon emitters that were trying to reduce their footprint can buy that carbon credit and reduce their exposure, because at times, let's say, a diesel truck manufacturer or a transportation company, they really can't get around the emission rates. So instead of being taxed, they fuel the bicycle commuter carbon avoidance market by creating a demand on the supply of the bicycle commuter carbon credits. And we want to create a methodology that local municipalities get the proceeds of which they pour back into the sustainable bicycle infrastructure.
I love that. And it's interesting because, we've talked to folks on the show about how we can use carbon credits to improve transportation funding, to improve bike and transit funding specifically. And it seems like there's ways that certain states like California, for example, do cap and trade and whatever else. But I'm always curious, like, what are the other markets that you're going to be selling to? So if you're creating a system where you can actually measure and find out what the actual emissions reduction is, who are you selling that to? Who's giving you money, especially if it's not something that can be used in the current markets, or if it's not something that the current markets are interested in purchasing?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned California. I really applaud their efforts. I think their mindset is in the right vein pertaining to being sensitive to the adverse impact of carbon emissions. They just came out with a press release, a new law a couple of weeks ago pertaining to something called the VMT Mitigation Bank. That stands for Vehicles Miles Tracked Mitigation Bank. And what that does is they're trying to reduce the miles towards your destination. A lot of people have heard of that 15-minute city, where if you could reduce the amount of distance you travel, you're therefore reducing the amount of emissions. Well, our process of carbon creation or carbon avoidance and creating a carbon credit with that feeds that model very, very well. And I think that you're going to hopefully find what we refer to as our pedal fortress with regards to securing the bicycle in an environment where creates an income by virtue of like parking. But in our model, what we want to do is provide a municipality a shared revenue model. As much as 80% of the proceeds of all of the facilities used to secure a bicycle can be poured back into the community on top of the bicycle carbon avoidance credits And on top of that, there's something referred to as an offset. I just briefly mentioned the SEC Climate Disclosure Act. There are 3 different scopes of which companies can collect data and report it, in which they can be held accountable for with that data reflection. The one I like to reference is called Scope 3, Category 7 of the Greenhouse Gas Protocols. Every company on the SEC that trade on the public markets have to report how their employees get to work. But Jeffrey, it's very frustrating to me because it's done on a biannual survey. I, for one, have never seen a survey that can be audited and create a monetary value off of it. It's because they claim it's too difficult. Well, we've come up with a methodology that not only creates the ability to track and verify it, but we're going to provide those corporations the ability to subtract that Scope 3, Category 7, the miles that, or the carbon credits that are created, or the carbon avoidance that's created, and subtract it from what's called Scope 3, Category 6, which is business travel emissions. And that's the offset side of the equation. So we're able to create a carbon credit, something that's monetizable, reward municipalities for the infrastructures that they create, and reward their company the offset value so they don't get heavy taxed or burdened and be able to reflect the corporate social responsibility of that ties in with their incentive programs to get their employees to bicycle commute. And Jeffrey, I want to point out one other important facet. Personally, I really loved George Orwell's 1984. And everyone knows that term, Big Brother and tracking. And a lot of people don't like the thought of their using their phone to be tracked. But we needed to create what I refer to as the want to. And we want to get people to agree to allow those miles to be tracked. And the easiest way you could do that is to reward them monetarily. So corporations consistently are trying to reduce their healthcare premiums, which would increase the bottom line, the profit margins of the corporation. But if they're able to do that, they could also save their employees money. Well, now we can empower human resource officers to renegotiate the premiums of these healthcare policies because they could categorically prove with verifiable data that their employees are more healthy. So corporations like Johnson & Johnson reduced a tremendous amount of the premiums based off of their employees' bicycle commuting, but that was faith-based. Ours is verifiable. And one more little nugget pertaining to the health benefit. There's an organization called Health IQ. At their website, you'll see that it's a life insurance policy company. They'll reduce their premiums as much as 40% if you bicycle 50 miles a week or more. But their actuarial tables don't have verifiable data. Companies like Strava does not have 1 mile that's verified amongst their 150 to 180 million users of that app. It's all faith-based. There's no checks and balances. We provide those checks and balances that empower corporations many different ways to save money.
So tell me specifically how the program, as you've envisioned it, works. So you have bike lockers and you have a way for people to track where they're going. You mentioned the way that you used it for the charity rides, but I'm curious, like how, if implemented or when implemented, how it would work specifically.
So I mentioned the fact that if my bike is ever stolen, I would like to call the FBI report it as kidnapping. I would not use any other methodology to secure my bicycle that's known to humankind right now and secure it outside. There's no locker facility that I feel comfortable with. My B-17 titanium railed Brooks saddle alone is something that if it takes 20 seconds to remove, I would cry. I really would. The frame might be there, but the pieces can be removed. So what we did in our, what we call the pedal fortress, is we embed a lot of technology into it. So much so that I would use my bicycles in this structure, in this facility, without a lock. How we do that is it's a reservation-enabled system. So online or through your app, you could reserve the spot. Therefore, you know if you ride, you've got a spot to secure your bike. So I mentioned the NFC tags and QR codes. We embed an RFID tag inside the tire of the wheel, and that is called a radio frequency identification. It has a tag identifier in that which is all this, what I'm referring to as part of our patent. So that needs a gateway. It's similar to what in the East Coast we call Easy Pass, the method of which a car goes underneath a threshold and you're billed for the toll and the right to use those roads. So within the facility, the structured pedal palace, we use the phone that the operator uses to open one door. Then the building has the gateway and tracks the bicycle. We bifurcate the building and the phone and track them differently, but at the same location. Why we do that is we have TV digital signage within the facility, and we'll route you, Jeffrey, to a specific door. Think of Get Smart. Remember that movie, that TV show, Get Smart, and multiple doors of security and clearances? So by virtue of routing you to different sections within the facility, we're going to be able to sync the door opening with the phone that you are operating and know that the RFID tagged bicycle that goes through that door is yours. So once you go into a specific, I'm going to call it a pod or a corral or a stable of lockers or racks, you could rack your bike and then we prompt you to leave a different exit. And that exit is going to have Sally Port doors or like airlocks, where the first door opens by you using your phone or biometrics in different modes. And that first door opens, the first door closes as you get in that vestibule. The system tracks and see if there's any RFID tags in that vestibule. If there is, Jeffrey, it better belong to you, because if it doesn't, you're stealing that bike, and we shut it down. We do with the digital signage. We say, hey, Jeffrey, I think you made a mistake. You took someone else's bike, go back and put it back. And we rely on the community and the goodwill as part of the safeguards. So if that is your bicycle or there is no RFID tag in that vestibule, the second door will open and you could leave. But we do much greater security than just that. That's really neat, and it's part of our technology and our patent. But I wanted to replicate the same type of security clearances that are needed for, let's say, to get into the inner sanctums of the Pentagon. How we do that is we use machine learning and language. We use AI. We have cameras that will be designed to track your gait, how you walk. We'll also track the frame, the bicycle frame, geometry that is part of associated to that phone and you. And if there's a breach or any red flags in that methodology, we will gladly let you rack the bike. We will not let you leave with that bike, because we're going to have one of the most secured online registry systems that provide the ability for the bike literally to have a little personality and say, hey, help me, I'm stolen. How we do that is like SRAM. I love the Gruppos, which are Bluetooth enabled. I don't have one of those yet. When I grow up, I hope to have one of those. The fly-by-wire methodology works off of Bluetooth. That Gruppo is part of our patented technology. So what we're going to do is not only have the RFID tag, which is a passive tracking device, we're going to have an active tracking device. The Bluetooth Gruppo communicate with the building. So if that building says, hey, your Gruppo was stolen off another bike and it's reported stolen, and you put that Gruppo, the transmission, on a different frame, we're still going to say, whoa, lock it down, secure it, call the FBI, the police, and make sure that that product is not removed from the environment. So with all those hardened layers of security, it increases the probability of someone like myself to use that system with confidence, knowing that my bicycle, any one of my bicycles I could ride with and secure it without bringing a lock.
How big is this locker, and where would you put it? If it's in a building, is it on the sidewalk? Where would it be located?
Great question. So again, I'm a Wall Street guy, so there's always that issue about the capital equipment cost. How do we overcome the burden for these sophisticated storage methodologies and systems? So on municipal land, there would be no lease expense, and we provide as much as 80% of the income to the local municipality for that right to use that land. The facilities can be as small as 50 in a location. We would put a couple, if it's 50, we'd probably do groups of 10. But the unit economics with all the doors and securities and the TVs becomes less profitable. It takes longer to overcome the capital equipment cost. So if you've ever been to Denmark or seen some of those massive bicycle garages where they have multi-layers and you could ride multi-levels. Nothing that big or dramatic, but they can be put pretty much anywhere. But the cost of the equipment needs to be covered. My little startup company with our team find it difficult to cover that capital equipment cost. So by using our methodologies, what we believe strongly is that what's called a green bond can be issued to a municipality to cover the capital equipment cost. So the taxpayers, the four-wheel people, aren't taxed for the two-wheel people's benefit. I don't like that animosity one versus the other. I'd like to believe that the bicycle commuters will be glad to be tracked and to use the system, just like car garages, in a methodology that could create the income that can service the debt associated to those facilities. But that's on municipal land. Jeffrey, you might be aware of something called the U.S. Green Build Council. And
USGBC. Yep.
There are many other organizations like that. Some are Fitwell, the Well Institute, GRESB. Those methodologies are point scoring systems to reward REITs, real estate investment trusts, and compelling them to create a more sustainable and environmentally friendly management of a building of the building, and the impact of the building on the local community members and the people within the building. Every one of those organizations have a benefit to the REIT if you have bicycle storage facilities. So if you were to Google the top 10 REITs in America and ask what are the top 5 requested amenities by their tenants, you'll find consistently in the top 5 is a secured bicycle storage facility. But they don't do it. The reason is money. They haven't figured out how to create an income that is greater on a per square foot basis than that of renting the retail space to a tenant. So if you were to, for an example, in San Jose, California, the commercial real estate is about $50 a square foot. Our methodology creates as high as $150 to $160 a square foot of income on the weekdays, and then they could have the reservation-enabled system on the weekends to further that revenue-generating facility, which they could pocket that money themselves. And in that model, they keep the 80%, and they become what I refer to as a VAR, value-added reseller.
So is this program only for commuting, or would it work for regular trips around the city?
So it's really important to understand that we bifurcate by design a commuter, a conscientious choice to reduce your carbon emissions and secure that bicycle from origination point to destination and to monetize those miles. But if I go out on a weekend just for fun or exercise, I'm not reducing carbon emissions. I'm having fun. So in that scenario, it could still be used. I would pay, I'm suggesting $3 an hour on the weekend for the right to secure my bicycle. If you think about it, if you go skiing, there's après ski events. If you go golfing, there's after you go golfing events, and even sailing or any nautical, almost every sporting event, there's an après event gathering. But if you go out with a group of friends and go for a ride, I can guarantee almost 100% of the time after the ride, you go home. You don't go to a restaurant. You don't go to a bar. You don't talk about the great ride you had because you can't secure all those bicycles. Well, this will create the mindset that, hey, let's go to this neighborhood because us 15 bicycle, a group of, I think you guys have got the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition and the Silicon Valley Bicycle. You have a lot of really wonderful groups out there. If they had a destination which they could meet after a ride and enjoy talking about that ride, I guarantee you there would be more commerce, more taxable dollars, and more ability for municipalities to create an income associated to the bicycle community.
I'm still curious about the other trips, not just the leisure trips, but like, the grocery store and to, take trips to daycare or whatever it is. A lot of folks on my street specifically have their cargo bikes and they're taking their kids to school, and it's really great. And obviously they're avoiding driving a car. Those are important trips that I think sometimes we don't talk about, even though those are the majority of trips. Commute trips take up from an overall perspective, it's like 18% of trips. And so the other ones are for everything else.
Thank you, and that's a very important point. If I had my druthers, I would only ride my bike. But what I wanted to do is provide the ability to say I made the conscientious choice to reduce my carbon footprint. So also in our patented application, by the way, it's a USPTO number 11998801B2. If I ever get a tattoo, it's probably going to be that. But in that, to be referred to as if I were to enable you, Jeffrey, to say, put on an apparel that said Gillette, for instance, on the jersey, which is a sponsor to the not-for-profit cause on the back, I'm trying to compel you to wear that jersey so you could create an income for the cause that you are trying to battle for your loved ones and whatnot. So if you were to do that, that's one thing, but how do you really create value for yourself and create the confidence for Gillette to empower a certain dollar transaction per mile? So if you were to purchase, if this, let's say, was at Walmart, a secured facility, was at Walmart, now I get to ride my cargo bike or my regular bike. I go into Walmart, I secure my bicycles in a parking facility. I go into Walmart, I pick up a product, and when I pay for it and I leave Walmart, I have a QR code or a barcode on every single product you purchase. And when I pick up the bicycle, I could utilize a phone or the attendant at the facility, scan that QR code, tie it to you, and all of a sudden the digital TVs and the signage inside, we could say, hey, Jeffrey, thank you so much for picking up that Gillette pack of razors, and you made a conscientious choice. And look, you're even wearing a Gillette jersey. Because of that, Gillette agrees to pay additional dollars to that not-for-profit in which you're trying to fight. So not fight with the not-for-profit, raise money to fight the cause that benefits the not-for-profit. So we thought of every little nuance, and it's important to dial in the understanding it's the want to. We're trying to compel the individual cyclist to change certain methodologies of disclosure in order to create value on what's being disclosed for the cause in which you are benefiting. And we'd like to gamify it. Like Strava is very, very successful. They gamify their age competition, the location, the speed, and the distance. And we don't like to compete because anytime I'm in a bike race, I guarantee I'm never going to come in first. I just won't do it. But I love it. So what I want to do is I want to come in first with the conscientious choice of reducing my carbon footprint. So we gamify the carbon avoidance value. And we match sometimes, what we'll be matching sometimes, your effort with planting trees in the local community to sequester CO2 as much as avoid producing CO2.
What are some of the hard questions you get about the project and the program that you're creating?
So from a technical basis, there's a term called additionality. If I were to take our solution and go over to Europe in a city that already has 80% of the city are bicycle commuting, how can I say they're avoiding producing carbon? They're already doing it, right? So I have to prove it's an additional user and be able to reflect that categorically without any question. So that's one of the hardships. The other is the capital equipment cost. And I don't like the thought of grants. I don't like the thought of being taxed either as an individual or an organization to come up with those dollars needed for that capital equipment. I like to suggest that us bicycle commuters are more than willing to secure their bicycle and willing to provide that big brother look-see, but we could scrub the name so there's no understanding of who did it, just the fact that it was achieved. And that, it's an educational thing, Jeffrey. It really is having the industry understand for the first time ever, this carbon avoidance value can be designed in a manner that is for the benefit of all. I mentioned gamification. Imagine if University of Michigan were to ask all of their alumni that bicycle commute to assign their carbon avoidance value to the school. And then you get Texas A&M and UCLA and all the other schools trying their very best to get more alumni to bicycle commute in a manner that creates an income to those schools. Those alumni are very proud, and they wear jerseys, they wear apparel with the logos of the school, and they buy the product. So why not make a conscientious choice to put on apparel or to use the system in which you voluntarily say, track my avoidance value and direct that value to organizations which I want that value to be directed to.
You said Texas A&M. You should have said Texas, the University of Texas.
I apologize.
I'm kidding.
On my board of directors, I've got 3 people from the University of Virginia. One of them is Tiki Barber, the NFL running back. So I normally mention UVA, but
I guess you should put that one in there every once in a while.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Like, who's going to be interested in doing this, and the general folks you're going to be doing this with, and hopefully moving this idea forward?
So what I'm really trying to do is get as many people to understand that it is there, it's available. You asked a question before that I want to go back to real quick. One was the difficulties I have, the hard questions I have. So one of them really is who writes the check, right? Because we have 12 distinct, unique methodologies to create income from every mile ridden. But who writes the check? If the individual is creating the value, I'm trying to make it so the corporations write the checks. But what I find equally as interesting is there's these terms, original equipment manufacturers and value-added resellers. And I don't want a large organization that has a lot of staff. I want to run it as they refer to as a lean organization. So if a helmet manufacturer were to put the QR codes and or NFC tags inside the helmet, we're going to provide something we refer to as a reverse royalty program. We will reward the helmet manufacturer as much as $1 a month if that helmet is used as part of the verification process that exceeds a certain threshold of usage. 200 days a year, X amount of time in the bicycle storage facilities. Same thing with bicycle manufacturers, cleats, apparel, you name it. And with that, we want to reward the industry in a manner that compels them to embed our technologies inside the product at the point of manufacturing. So that kind of answers the question, the hardships and one of the difficulties. But when it comes to writing the check, that's also a difficult part because it's the chicken and egg. We're a small little startup with a tremendous board of directors. Don't let them know I said that. A really phenomenal team. Again, don't let them know I said that. But we really are focused with the precision of a surgeon. And what I believe firmly is you'll start seeing our facilities crop up first in California because of the recent rules that have been provided and their existing cap and trade methodology. And they're a state that is leading the world pertaining to climate sensitive causes. But what's really interesting, a close second, very well could be Texas. The oil state, they have a need to come up with a methodology to support the bicycle infrastructure. And this is sustainable and it's circular, meaning the ones that create the value are the ones using not just the product, the infrastructure. So there's a really great pathway run by a gentleman by the name of Dennis, which is the East Coast Greenway. It goes from Maine to Florida. And I can't wait to get on my bike and start in Maine and pedal all the way to Florida and assist Dennis to create a sustainable contribution of income designed to extend that safe bicycle pathway, speaking to the 40 some odd mayors that can be lined up and empower them to create an income for the community.
I like that. And, I wanted to reach out, and my friend Anna sent me your press release initially. And I thought it was interesting just because some of the stuff that I'd read before in Chongqing, I think I sent you the article about that specifically. They were the first transit agency in China to be able to use their carbon avoidance credits basically to fund the system. So they've got, it's not a large amount of money, $800,000 or whatever it is, but it's something, and something's not nothing, right? So I hope that this type of idea can be expanded to transit, to bikes, to everywhere in every state in the country, because climate change is, such a big issue, and avoiding emissions is such a big question that we have. This is one of the ways to do it. And I find your company interesting, and I hope that you all have success. And I want to know where folks can find out more about it. Where can folks get information about what you all are doing? Where can folks reach out if they're interested in testing it?
Sure. Well, again, the name of the company is The Dandy Horse. If you go to thedandyhorse.com, you'll see bunch of information there. That's our website. You'll probably see more information at LinkedIn underneath the profile, The Dandy Horse. It's chock full of great facts and presentations. I think you're going to start seeing it crop up throughout the United States, hopefully very quickly. Again, we're a small little startup, but we have a unique patented technology, and we have a very focused, dedicated team of people that really want to see this succeed, not necessarily just for ourselves. One of the things my team believes in is that once we start in mass addressing the solution for charities, we want to make every ride a charity ride. I really would love to be able to be known as the company that created from beginning to end, the company that generated $1 billion worth of not-for-profit contributions faster than any other company ever known. I really believe we could do that because a great organization like Bike MS, they have 77,000 cyclists that go to 65 events a year, and they raised $190 million to fight MS. Well, I really believe that they would use our methodology far greater than only 65 days. They could use our methodology every day to take on and obliterate MS. And in my case, my dad suffered from Parkinson's, and I'm sure that unfortunately almost every person I know is related to or has a loved one that has been adversely impacted by an ailment that has an underlying not-for-profit that is trying to raise money and awareness to combat that ailment. And I want our technology as a tool to enable the goodwill and the want-to of individuals to use our methodology to combat those ailments.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the links to the site in the show notes and to the LinkedIn page. Mark, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I get very passionate and excited talking about our little company, and hopefully we won't be little for long, and you'll see us crop up everywhere and be able to enjoy your bicycle without locks.
Thanks for joining us. The Talking Headways podcast is a project of The Overhead Wire and appears first at Streetsblog USA. Thanks to our generous Patreon supporters for supporting this show and Mondays at The Overhead Wire. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/TheOverheadWire. Sign up for our 18-year-old daily newsletter by visiting TheOverheadWire.com or check the show notes for other cool merch and opportunities to connect. Follow along using your podcatcher of choice, but if you can't find it there, you can always find the show at its original home, usa.streetsblog.org. We'll see you next time at Talking Headways.